Good morning, Sandi, and welcome to Boston.
Good morning.
I'd like to know off the top what you're finding to be the most in-demand benefits for workers these days, because most of us are at companies that can't offer everything to everybody. So if you're an HR pro, you sort of have to prioritize what's going to be most important. So as people are making those decisions, what do people really want? What do workers really want?
So good morning, everyone. And my notes, because we did a speed dating session on Friday.
We did.
And I want to make sure I don't forget anything. I think of this in terms of uppercase B and lowercase b. You might hear my New York accent. I live in New York, and we have our largest US location in Boston. And what I found interesting, and I think this is in the category of lowercase b, food. So in terms of trying to bring people into the office, I don't know if others had the same experience in terms of bringing food in to try to attract people in the office. So that's the lowercase b.
Along with the cold brew on tap and the...
Exactly. I think, if you just take a step back, and for, folks like me in the room, I think a good place to start is just general benchmarking and understanding what's prevalent in a particular industry. I think the things that are probably most in demand, we all know flexible work arrangements, hybrid, et cetera. Mental health benefits, and when I talk about mental health benefits, very specifically access to high quality providers. Family formation resources. In financial services and maybe other industries, surrogacy, adoption, fertility, things that might fall under a DEIB umbrella are things that I think are in high demand. Something that is a little bit newer, but very, very important. One of the other areas that I think are important is time off, and specifically paid time off to care for a child. But what we've done, and also a little bit new, is we don't have paid PTO, paid time off policies or programs, but we implemented paid caregiver leave. So we're up to 10 days right now, started with 5, so separate and distinct from childcare. So those are the kinds of things that we're hearing, but I always go back to the place in terms of benchmarking to understand prevalence. That's kind of how we get things done, and not always the case. There have been years where I have been trying to implement certain benefits where benchmark data would suggest we should have it. Not so easy with respect to cost or concerns about cost.
And of course, pay, healthcare coverage.
Still really, really big, of course. There we go, we're back on. I was just saying pay and healthcare continue to, of course, be top priorities for workers too, and we're coming out of a couple of years where it seemed like employers had to be really generous on those fronts to attract top talent. What are you seeing now as we see inflation moderating a little bit? The labor market isn't quite as tight as it was maybe a year or two ago. Does that give employers a little leverage to maybe not be so generous, Sandi?
Yeah, I think it gives employers leverage for sure. We don't think about taking away stuff. During COVID, there are many employers here might have kind of tightened their belt. That's not the way we've approached things. Even if we've got 8%, 10% utilization or engagement in a particular resource or benefit, that could be perceived as very high value. So that's not something that we would consider pulling. I have never in my career managed toward a particular budget, which might be a head scratcher for a lot of people, but never. I've never had to manage toward a budget. So pulling something, the noise is the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Is the thought that it would just be short-sighted? You would maybe save a buck in the short run, but you'd turn employees off, you'd have retention, and
exactly.
Then you got the,
yeah. Okay. And for those who are not aware of Brown Brothers, we're in business for 205 years. It's a privately held partnership, and the average tenure for the partners is 28 years. So there's a lot of relationships there. For that population of 5%, that's enrolled in that very special benefit, to pull that becomes very noisy.
You mentioned some benefits that are not brand new during the pandemic, but certainly accelerated mental health coverage, flexibility to work in a hybrid or remote. I think a lot of us have been wondering which of these pandemic-era perks are going to stay around and which were kind of fleeting, temporary measures. So what are you seeing? Because we do see a lot of companies clawing back that remote flexibility right now.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Financial services in particular, anything that you're reading in the press, we're moving toward, not us, we're 3 days hybrid. In financial services, 4 days, 5 days.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll move in that direction. But those employers that we compete for talent with, they're going that way. I think mental health benefits are table stakes now, no different than you would see in, health plan offerings, et cetera. But I think flexible work arrangements, definitely here to stay, and mental health benefits, absolutely table stakes.
That's a big umbrella, though. I mean, there's counseling, there's therapy.
There's a fraction of American workers who have access to ketamine-assisted mental health therapy through employer-sponsored insurance plans. And I'm curious where you see that going. I mean, is that something that's going to remain on the fringe, or could you picture that getting more mainstream in the coming years?
I'm going to look at my notes for this one. Okay. It is not currently approved by the FDA. Or
caveat.
very, very important caveat. Or, I hope I get this right, USSPTF. So it's preventive services that are a lot of employers and insurers use to support whether a particular colonoscopies, for example. I think we've lowered the age as we would define as preventive care down to 40? I can't remember. But those are the guardrails that we consider when in fact having something covered under the plan. So the long answer is no, until it's FDA approved or the organization that I mentioned deems that to be medication that's covered under a plan.
Is it something that comes up at conversations with your fellow HR pros? Is it something that you feel pressure from workers to think about?
Nothing.
Not yet.
Nothing. And it will be talked about at the most senior levels should it come up. Even that one individual that might request it, because likely that one individual will go up the chain and it'll find its way to me that way. So, which is not unlike how lots of folks, I see heads nodding, and I'll get benchmark data and I'll go to the partners and I'll say, well, this is not really, here's the reasons why. So that's kind of how I spend half my day, chasing that stuff down.
But not a decision to be made on a whim. This is something
No.
that you'll move very deliberately.
Absolutely. Look, I think there's also, we are risk averse in many ways, where if we don't have kind of the air cover of, FDA approval, there's a likelihood that we might be reticent to even make that available for employees or members.
One of the reasons I ask is because I think the use of psychedelics or psychedelic-like drugs for mental health therapy it's an example of the lengths to which some employers are going to try to give their employees access to all kinds of options for mental health therapy. And yet I wonder, Sandi, whether some of those same companies are making the same effort to prevent some of the anxiety, burnout, stress in the first place by giving their workers reasonable, manageable workloads, especially right now as so many employers are focusing on efficiency. Mm-hmm. What do you see?
Yeah, so I love this, and we don't do a particularly great job from a leadership perspective. I do at the top of the house. I see it within particular business areas where you have leaders and managers who will have team meetings, walking team meetings, if you will. And this means people are remote, but they're doing a walking meeting. Or what I'm hearing other employers do is, from an Outlook perspective, default settings to schedule a meeting you can't schedule a 30-minute meeting. The default is 25 minutes. Or the default is 50 minutes, where you're giving people a break for them to move their laundry from the washer to the dryer, or run down and get something to eat, or, get to the kitchen, use the restroom, stuff like that. But it's something we've been trying to impart, haven't gotten a lot of traction, but it is happening within particular teams, but it's not coming from the top.
What about sort of the always-on culture, people feeling like they're pressured to respond to emails at all hours of the night or on the weekends?
Yeah.
I mean, the schedule send function is very popular in some workplaces, not all. What do you notice?
Not doing it. We're multinational. I feel obligated to respond to an email that comes in at 9:30 at night. I wake up in the morning, as I did today, with an onslaught of emails from Europe and Asia. And we have not found the secret sauce. But it's great to see other employers actually walk the walk in doing that, because they're really demonstrating that we are committed to allowing employees to have boundaries. Not something we're great at, and I think it's very much a cultural concept.
But is your experience just the real talk on this issue? I mean, honestly, because I think for a lot of the rank and file workers I talk to in my day job, they want to know, hey, my company is offering, work-life balance perks, and they're saying, oh, we don't, send emails or hold meetings after these hours and whatnot. And what they want to know is, can I really advance with those boundaries?
Yeah.
Or is that kind of a false promise, and actually I'm not going to be able to make it?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and you think about the in-person experience. Being seen is really, really important. Relationships matter. I think you don't get the same benefit, if you will. That's the lowercase b I was talking about. In terms of that in-person collaboration, I have someone on my team who has about a 2.5-hour commute one way.
Wow.
She's in the office 1 day a week and has always been pre-COVID. She was in the office yesterday, and I know she's going to be in the office tomorrow. It's breaking my heart, but she's got some high visibility meetings that she does not want to be remote for. And she understands the importance of in-person meetings and being seen. That's hard.
I think what you're hitting on is the value of mentorship or the apprenticeship model, right? That's one of the big arguments we've heard from a lot of financial services firms and others for calling people back, which is to say, this is how our people learn. They learn by sitting side by side, traditionally kind of informally, but we've seen some companies roll out more organized, explicit mentoring programs. Is that a benefit trend that you see right now, where you're sort of assigned an internal mentor and you're going to meet in person, and that's one of the draws to get people into the office, yes, but also, pitched as a career growth perk?
Yeah, we've had mentorship programs. I think there's a lot of good to it. I think there's less good to it in certain, pairings don't always mesh. We're doing this thing called Coffee Connections, which brings people together. I think it depends. I don't know necessarily that having a formal mentorship program has the desired outcomes all the time.
And are workers hungry for it? Is this something you hear younger professionals clamoring for, or no?
I think what we have been more successful with are these, whether they're employee resource groups or business resource groups. We've got a young professionals network. So I think that provides them with opportunity in terms of visibility, senior leadership in a group setting, which is, I think, kind of a smaller lift than having some more formal mentorship program. It's a lot more organic, and our employee resource groups are super, super organic, grassroots, and more informal. And it's, you can sometimes pop in and pop out versus a more structured program. But we do have, again, as I said, this Young Professionals Network, which is a global network. It's by location, but it's gotten a great amount of attraction, and it's actually very exciting to see these kids get involved in a less formal way.
These kids.
Yeah, I'm not one of those, but yeah.
Folks, if you're impressed by Sandi's insights, you'll be even more impressed to know that she's joining us here just a few days after running the New York Half Marathon. So she does it all. Yeah. That's not the kind of thing that you just can do on a whim and say is like a New Year's resolution. I think I'll just go out and run 13.1 miles. But a lot of folks are trying to get fit, right? We're in March. We're a few months into a lot of people's New Year's fitness resolutions, often with the help of company-sponsored wellness programs, right? And traditionally, that would be like, here's a discount on your gym membership. Here's a discount on your diet program. Now we see some employees clamoring for, hey, where's my Mounjaro, Sandi? Where's my Ozempic? What is that doing to the HR landscape when it comes to wellness benefits?
So for the benefit managers in the room, I feel for you. You must get those panicked phone calls and those panicked emails about supply chain issues. Why am I no longer available to get Wegovy? Crazy. So this is a very, very, very interesting area. And it's for those who I spoke to last night, and as I mentioned to you, so I'm coming off not only of that race, and thank you for acknowledging there's a 0.1, because that 0.1 of a half
that
is
last
probably, it'll kill you. It'll kill you. So I don't know if anyone is a MetLife client, but they had their annual symposium in DC, and I don't know if anybody was there. And there was a whole session on, there was a Harvard economist who has a heavy focus on healthcare, and we were talking about pharmacy, which is interesting. I'm going to get to the wellness connection in a second. And you think about Ozempic and Mounjaro, and there was a discussion around these very, very expensive drugs that are cures that we don't cover, but we cover drugs as treatment where there's no assurance that the treatment will actually lead to that desired state, right? So you really need to think about this as an employer, because those drugs, particularly for type 1 diabetes, or those drugs are cures versus treatment. So it's a really interesting thing to focus on. We'll cover things for treatment, but we won't cover things for cures, which is somehow backward.
It does seem backwards.
When you're thinking,
or at least short-sighted, right?
Very. When you're thinking about how to care for your member, it's just take that away. How does this affect, and my notes to myself around how these GLP-1s are affecting wellness programs, I think we all recognize that our wellness programs really are focused on changing behavior. And if changing behavior were easy, we would all do it. Okay? This is those who view well-being and wellness through the lens of intrinsic value, these wellness programs probably mean nothing. Like, if you're going to do it, you're just going to do it whether you have a well-being program or not. This is very much focused on behavior change. When you think about point solutions, whether they're MSK related or they're, again, wellness, I don't see the intersection. Just by a show of hands, does anyone have any hard dollar ROI tied to their wellness program? Excellent.
A few.
I want to talk to you because I can't find it. Again, I think it's table stakes. We provide an incentive, a financial incentive, when people achieve certain milestones. No different than most of you. It's got to be verified, but I don't see the connection because a lot of this is tied to behavior change.
Well, what about on some other benefits? Because I think, listen, you offer benefits because it's the right thing to do. You care for your employees, but you are an employer, you are a business, you're looking for a return on investment. Where do you see that return on benefits? I mean, backup childcare comes to mind because that's a way that you keep somebody on the job that day instead of taking a day off. But where else do you get a bang for your buck?
Yeah, I don't see it in a lot of ways. I think if you're a CEO, in my case, a managing partner, you're more interested in understanding morale. It's soft ROI. I think backup childcare is a perfect example, because if you provide that, that means your employee is coming to work and they're not taking the day off. I can't find anything else that has a strong correlation as much as that. Soft dollar ROI, engagement, morale, I think those things are where we focus. But I'm never, and when I try to demonstrate hard dollar ROI, there's a lot of skepticism in, really, is that the case?
So how do you weigh that? I mean, there are certain benefits that are just realistically, they're only going to appeal to a small slice of your workers. There's only so many people who want to go to the online Zumba class, but the people who do, Sandi, may be very passionate about it. And if you take it away, you'd erode the morale. So how do you weigh things like morale and employee goodwill as you're making benefits decisions?
I will go back to my stock answer of benchmarking. That's a safe place to be. I can defend it and say this is not something prevalent within financial services, or it's cost prohibitive. But in terms of value, backup childcare is highly, highly valued. It's expensive. It's not something we're going to take away, but it's a little gray. I'm not going to lie. It's gray.
I guess the last thing I'm curious about then, Sandi, is in the big picture, one of the frustrations I hear from a lot of HR pros is that, hey, I and my company work so hard to put together these great benefits packages, and we're trying to recruit and retrain top talent, and then people just fixate on salary anyway. I mean, do you run into that? And are employees sort of getting the message that they need to look at total comp and not just the salary?
Yeah. It's this total rewards philosophy. We try to instill that. We try to impart that. Many of you offer, as do we, total reward statements where people don't realize how much the employer is paying for these programs. What we're trying to do, which is a little bit difficult, and it's really on the incentive side, is for new joiners. As an example, we want to be able to provide candidates with a side-by-side snapshot which looks at everything, not just compensation, salary, bonus, other types of incentive programs. Not the easiest thing to do. But you're
doing the math for them. Those employees traditionally have had to do this themselves, right? Here's your offer. Oh, I'm trying to add up. Okay, well, how does that premium compare to my last employer, right? But you're doing that math for them.
We're doing that in terms of 401k match. We're doing that in terms of what our benefits package costs, paid time off, tuition reimbursement, everything that we can really kind of get under the umbrella, where we're able to highlight that it is, quote, not just about pay. There's other stuff that is equally important. And it's really in the moment that the employee actually needs that particular resource that they don't recognize the value until there's something that is perhaps catastrophic, or there's a crisis in their lives or their families' lives.
Well, I'm sure that you'll meet lots of other people today who are trying to spread that total rewards gospel with you. Sandi, Stein, Brown Brothers Harriman, thank you so much for your time this morning.